Employment is a major issue for the disability sector. Attitude has proved that the media can be a great career option.
Geoff Adams-Spink gives us someone to aspire to. He's worked for the pinnacle of broadcasters, the BBC, for the past 18 years. Here's his story.
Hello and welcome to London. I'm Geoff Adams-Spink and this is the headquarters of the BBC right here in the heart of London's West End. I'm the age and disability correspondent for the BBC. I report for the news website, I report for radio and for television.
When I first joined the BBC, I wanted nothing to do with the subject or other disabled people or anything. Over my 18 years in the BBC, I've gone on my own little journey of discovery and come to terms, I think, with my disability and use my knowledge of disability as a strength. What do I bring to disability that a non-disabled person would bring? Well, I think for a start, there's a huge amount of common understanding.
Hi, how are you? I was born with disabilities caused by a drug called thalidomide, which was given to pregnant women in the late 50s and early 60s, and it caused deformities in the fetus. You find that typical thalidomide damage is short arms, like my arms here. You quite often find that the lower limbs are affected as well. Mine aren't, so at least I can walk and run and get myself out of trouble. But I've also was born with one eye missing and very, very severely impaired vision in the other eye. I've got about 10% vision.
Geoff's meeting the producer of the radio programme In Touch.
And it's for blind and partially sighted people. And all the team on that, including myself, is visually impaired. So obviously Geoff, with his visual impairment as well, is well qualified to slip stories to us.
Success in this industry didn't come easy. Geoff had to fight hard to get a job he wanted.
My first attempt to get into the BBC was an abject failure, not because of anything to do with me as a person, but because to do with my impairments. I applied to be a trainee local radio reporter. The person who interviewed me thought I was an incredibly impressive person, but couldn't give me a job because I'm unable to drive a car. Now, in those days, that kind of discrimination, that kind of blatant discrimination was completely legal.
Later, he was offered a job on a radio programme for and by disabled people.
I said, I don't want it, thank you very much. And there was a slight sort of intake of breath, and I said, well, sorry, but I need to prove to myself and to everybody else that I can cut it with everybody else in the BBC, that I can do mainstream. Fortunately, I did get offered a job as a trainee in radio and television news, in with the mainstream, in with non-disabled people, and I did cut it and was sent all over the world.
Assignments in Africa and the Middle East had a huge impact on him, both professionally and personally.
Not bad, actually.
I remember during the first Gulf War, for example, I had a huge mortgage to pay at the time, and it was all hands on deck, and I worked 42 12 or 14-hour days without a break, and almost killed myself in the process. But it taught me a lot about journalism. It taught me a lot about having to be fast and having to be very accurate. Reply to her and say, H, I don't know whether you've seen my story.
He was deeply affected by his experiences in the mid-90s in Rwanda, reporting genocide during the Civil War.
A huge crime against humanity was being committed, and we weren't there to witness it. We weren't there to tell people what was happening. And I happened to be working on the Today programme, which is the sort of main morning radio news show for the UK. And I said to the editor, let me go. And he said, OK, but do it from the periphery. Don't go into Rwanda. Don't go and get yourselves killed. So we did stay around the periphery for a while. And then we were offered, one of those sort of late night sort of barroom chats that you have with people. Somebody said to us, oh, we could get you into Rwanda if you like. And I rang the editor and he said, well, not really sure. And I said, look, it'll be fine, don't worry. So in we went, and we, did do some reporting on the genocide firsthand, and it was extremely shocking. It was probably worse than I had imagined.
Another important project was a radio programme Geoff produced on thalidomide.
I interviewed my mother, and we spoke very candidly for the first time ever about how she'd reacted when I was born. And I know that was something that both of us found really difficult to do, but I think it was really important. And I think by sharing with the audience that conversation that we had, it perhaps helps other people to sort of clear away some of their baggage as well. What have we got email-wise then?
Geoff ignored his disabilities as much as he could
More than
until
happy.
he had a prolapsed disc in his 30s. He was off work for 6 months and changes had to be made.
Yeah. And I went to the BBC and I said, listen guys, you know, the game's up. I'm a bit of a fraud here. I need to admit to you that I am disabled. I do need a lot of help.
His employers
that's
responded
going
by
on,
employing a full-time personal assistant.
And I was so amazed at how much more I was able to do. In other words, how much I was able to concentrate on doing the job rather than worrying about bits of the job I wasn't going to be able to do.
Geoff's work is also his life mission.
I want to do stories that affect everybody's life. So, although, let's say a blind man flying around the world in a two-seater aircraft will raise money and loads of publicity will be generated by that, it actually isn't going to affect the life of any other blind person on the planet particularly. I'm far more interested in measures, developments, things that will affect the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people.
This, for example, is a story that I wrote yesterday for today, and it's about a new EU regulation that applies across the whole of the 27, I think it is now, countries that belong to the EU. And it means that disabled air passengers now have some form of redress if they face discrimination by airlines. It's going to affect about 7 million disabled people who take to the skies every year.
There's one more appointment to keep today. This private room at the BBC Wine Bar is the venue for the Disabled Staff Forum. They keep tabs on disability issues within the organisation.
Yes. It's easy if you're articulate and you know what you're talking about.
Geoff says attitudes to disability have improved markedly over his working life.
We're now encouraging people to become active citizens, to take part in politics, sport, culture, to avail themselves of educational opportunities and to be part of the world of work. And one of the other changes is all of the laws, rules and regulations that mean that the environment has to be more barrier-free than it has been up to now. When you tell a pub, for example, that they've got to make sure they've got accessible toilet facilities, at the time it feels like a huge hump to overcome. But, you know, remember, the same voices of reaction and conservatism were raised when people wanted to stop, you know, the slave trade or stop, you know, 9-year-old boys being shoved up to clean chimneys. You know, nobody would even dream about doing that now.
From London, it's goodbye from me, Geoff Adams-Spink, BBC News, Davies Wine Bar.